Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkhbhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May all be happy. May all be free from diseases. May all see only goodness everywhere. May no one be subject to misery. May, by God's grace, peace reigns everywhere. Good evening, friends. This is an ancient prayer which I just chanted. Prayer for the well-being of everyone. And this evening I have to give a talk, and the subject of my talk will be, what is Samadhi? Samadhi is a Sanskrit term. It is there in Hinduism, Samadhi, which means complete absorption, so to say. Absorption of what? Absorption of the mind of a person. When the mind is completely absorbed in something, then that mind is said to be in Samadhi. Once one person came to Sri Ramakrishna, who is a divine incarnation, and said to him, "Revered sir, our scriptures say that everything is divine, so I am also divine. Then why do I not experience that I am God?" Then Sri Ramakrishna said, "Whether you know it or not, you are God." That's what he said. His God means Brahman. He is Avang Manasa Gocharam. Brahman means greater than the greatest. And according to Hinduism, the entire world has come out of Brahman. Brahman is beyond time, space and causation. Yet from Brahman, this time, space and causation, all these things came. Like there is a clear sky, and suddenly a storm comes and it starts raining heavily. So this rain came from the sky. We are not to suppose that it is the essential quality of the sky to pour rain. The sky is something where there is nothing. No water, no rain, no clouds. But that's what we think. We impose clouds and other things on the clear sky. The sky being there, all those things seem to be there. The scriptures of Hinduism say that this Brahman is like a movie screen. Scriptures don't say, but I use the analogy of the movie screen to explain something which is there in our scriptures. So we cannot really describe it. Avang Manaso Gocharam, in Sanskrit it is called. It cannot be described through words, and it cannot be known by ordinary mind. That's what Brahman is. That's what is also called Nirguna Brahman, divinity without any attributes. The same sky which is like a movie screen, on that is being projected so many movies. And those movies are being projected by the minds of people. But without the presence of the movie screen, these motion pictures would not have been possible. The movie screen is eternal. Its existence makes other things appear to exist, what people see in the movies. That's why Hindu philosophy says that Brahman at the beginning was attributeless, like a white movie screen. And on that, this world movie is being projected. By whom? By the minds of people. Our minds project all those things. Seattle sky usually is a little grayish, but people look at the same sky and their minds are like so many colored eyeglasses. Some are reddish, some are bluish, some are greenish, and all those colors will be projected on the greyish sky, and the sky will appear to be reddish, bluish or greenish. But the sky does not change its color. These colors are being projected on the sky. So also this entire world is a projection of our minds. Had we not had our minds, then there would not be a world, the kind of world we experience. To know Nirguna Brahman, one should go beyond the mind that we have. Because even the mind is a projection on Nirguna Brahman. And the owner and the object owned cannot be the same. That's why I own my physical body. As the owner, I have to be different from my body. I own my sense organs and motor organs. As the owner of them, I have to be different from them. What about my mind? I own my mind, therefore I cannot be my mind. And yet, the idea of my individual existence is a thought of my conscious mind. That thought is I, or it is called ego. Had the ego been not there, then we'd be one with that indivisible divinity. But it is ego which is making us separate from one another. To know these things, we need mental concentration. And that's what this Hindu philosophy teaches us. And if the mind can be concentrated, then that mind will enable us to know what Brahman is. How that is possible, that I shall discuss today. When the mind is concentrated, then it becomes like a laser beam. We know that light is composed of photons. If all the photons can be made to travel in a straight line, then that becomes a laser beam. Ordinary light cannot reach the distant moon, but If a laser beam can be focused on the moon and it will reach there. So also with our minds. If we can project our minds like laser beams, if all the thoughts can be concentrated and can be made to go in a straight line, then that will be a mind which is called a mind in meditation. Such a concentration of mind is called meditation or dhyanam. We had a neighbor, a lady. One day she came here, many years ago. I had just come from India. She was an elderly lady. She said to the Swami who was in charge of this center, Swami Vividishanandaji, said to him, Swami, last night, the entire night I meditated, she said. That was a ridiculous claim, because if a person knows how to meditate, then in less than half an hour, that person will experience divinity. Because meditation is focusing the mind at one point. That is one thought. Pratyaya ekatanata dhyanam. That means what is meditation? Meditation is when the thought is just one thought, pointed thought. And then it continues, then that is called meditation. So if the mind can be concentrated on anything for 12 seconds, that is called dharana, holding the mind there. And then if 12 times a person can hold the mind onto an object, then that becomes meditation. That is for 144 seconds. And 12 times of that dhyanam, which is 28 minutes and 48 seconds. If the mind can be focused on one object like that, then that will be called Samadhi. Actually, it is called asampragyata Samadhi. And then one becomes one with divinity. There is another kind of samadhi, it is called sampragyata samadhi. Its aim is to gain control over nature. And there are different types of that sampragyata samadhi. One is called savitarka samadhi, another is called nirvitarka samadhi, another is called savichara samadhi, another is called nirvichara samadhi, another is called sananda samadhi, and another is called asmita samadhi. These are sampragyata samadhi. But asampragyata samadhi is a state where divinity is there only. That is real samadhi. A mind in samadhi is like salt in a supersaturated solution. I am using an expression which I studied in chemistry. Among other subjects, chemistry is one of my subjects which I studied. Supersaturated solution. If there is a beaker containing water, distilled water, and I have some salt crystals, and I go on putting that salt crystals in that water and stirring it, then that salt will get dissolved. Then a time will come when this water will dissolve only so much salt. After that, if I put more, then that salt will settle at the bottom. showing that this water has so many holes in it, and this salt enters into those holes, so to say. That's why they become invisible. Those salt crystals become invisible. But when it cannot, when it becomes supersaturated, then it cannot dissolve any more salt. So those salt crystals settle at the bottom of the beaker. So if I can create a beaker of supersaturated solution of salt, then I can see certain things. That supersaturated solution, if I put into another beaker and I put just one crystal of salt into that, then that crystal will act strangely. It will start the recrystallization process. Some of the salts which is in solution will come out in the form of crystals. This is called recrystallization. So, a supersaturated solution into which if I put one crystal of salt, then that will, a portion of that supersaturated solution will, salt of that supersaturated solution will start coming out. When a spiritual person, a saintly soul, has been able to dissolve his or her entire mind in divinity, at that time, then that mind becomes like a supersaturated solution. And then one thought of compassion for the rest of the humankind will act as that crystal which starts the recrystallization process. And then a little portion of that mind will come out and will be able to maintain contact with this world of time, space and causation. That's how the divine incarnations communicate with us. Their minds are in supersaturated solution of divinity, so to say. But a little portion of that comes out because they retain a thought of compassion for the other beings. So that thought brings their mind out. And with that mind they interact with other people. That's how a divine incarnation like Krishna, like Rama, like Buddha, like Jesus Christ, like Ramakrishna and Sarada Devi, they interact with others. The Bhagavad Gita says, whenever there is any decadence in spirituality, then God bodies himself forth. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhuthano adharmasya tatatmanam sriyamyam. When there is decline of spirituality, at that time I create myself. That is like recrystallized salt. God comes and showers God's compassion on us. That's whatever teachings Jesus, Buddha and others and Sri Ramakrishna have given. So those teachings are no other than the recrystallization of their highly purified or divine minds. So mind in Samadhi is like salt in a supersaturated solution. and that solution is in divinity. Sri Ramakrishna would do that. He wanted to help. When he was in that temple complex, which is in the outskirts of Calcutta in a place called Dakshineshwar, then he would go to the roof, flat roof of a brick building, and there were staircases to go there. And then he would go there and then he would pray to God. And he used to pray to God, addressing God as Divine Mother. He looked upon God as Mother. That's what he taught us. God can be Mother, Father, everything. Because all this idea of motherhood and fatherhood, these are all projections of human minds and God. Like different colors projected on the grey sky of Seattle by different colored eyeglasses, the colored minds of people. Sri Ramakrishna, after going to the roof of that temple, would say to the Divine Mother, Mother, that is God, where are they? That means God had incarnated in the form of Ramakrishna to help them ascend to that state of divinity. But they were not coming. So that's why. And out of compassion he had come. God had taken the form of Ramakrishna. So but those people were not coming. So then he was saying, where are they? They have not come yet. Then he heard a voice within. Yes, they will come, they will come. And gradually one by one started coming. One of them was Narendra, who later on became Vivekananda. Then there was Rakhal, who became Brahmananda, and several others who became saints, having come in contact with Ramakrishna. They manifested their divinity also. And did they all acquire Samadhi? We know that at least Narendra acquired Samadhi, the highest form of Samadhi. And he had read in the scriptures about that Samadhi. When only divinity remains and the world apparition disappears. So Narendra wanted to experience that. Asampargata Samadhi, as it is called. And he once requested Sri Ramakrishna, may I have that experience? Sri Ramakrishna was delaying. He was not giving him that experience. Then he said, then one day, Narendra, while he was in that house where Sri Ramakrishna was living at that time, toward the end of his life, in a place called Kashipur near Calcutta. Then Narendra was there, and then he suddenly had that Samadhi. And Narendra was no ordinary person. He was also a great saint in his previous incarnation, but he had come down to assist Ramakrishna to convey his message to the world. But he had that Samadhi. And then he had no body consciousness. He could not identify with his body. He could see only divinity. Then when some friends who were present there at that time, and he then said, where is my body, he said. He was not even aware of his body. But eventually that sense of his body came back. And Sri Ramakrishna also came down. He used to live in a room upstairs. He came down and said to Narendra, you were troubling me to have that experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and you have got it now. But you will get it again, and now the door to this Samadhi will be closed, and it will be opened only when you will have done the Divine Mother's work. That means he had been brought by Sri Ramakrishna to help him in preaching the message of divinity. So Narendra after that tried to have Samadhi on his own, but he failed every time. Then he heard that there was a great saint in Uttar Pradesh, in a place called Gazipur. His name was Pauhari Baba. So he went to Pauhari Baba, hoping that Pauhari Baba would help him to have that Samadhi. But Pauhari Baba could see that spiritual depth of Narendra, and he knew that he could not help him anymore. Rather, it is he who could help Pauhari Baba. That's what Pauhari Baba thought. At that time, Sri Ramakrishna had passed away, but he appeared before Narendra and said, "You don't have to go to him. Yes, he will get your Nirvikalpa Samadhi in due course." So Narendra did not try to become a follower of Pauhari Baba. And when he discovered that Pauhari Baba wanted to have spiritual power from him, then he abandoned that idea. Then later on he had to come to America to attend the Parliament of Religions and all. And at that time his service was hired after the Parliament, because he became very famous. About him the newspapers wrote, "He is an orator by divine right." Such was Narendra's oratory. And then a lecture bureau hired him. Saying that the lecture bureau would pay him some money. And Narendra thought that with that money he could start some religious organization in the name of Ramakrishna. And eventually the Ramakrishna mission was started by him. But anyway, and so that's why for a few months he went to different places of America and he went on lecturing him. And Sri Ramakrishna, even though he was not physically there, he had passed away, he would appear to him at that time and would tell him on what subject he would have to speak. So under instruction of Sri Ramakrishna, Narendranath would give those teachings. And he would have the vision of Sri Ramakrishna in that state of mind which is called Sampragyata Samadhi. He could see him there. And sometimes it is strange that when Sri Ramakrishna would come and talk to Narendra, these words were heard by others also. Narendra at that time, he was Vivekananda and he was staying in a particular person's home, and the owner of that home could hear Vivekananda talking to someone. And Vivekananda was talking to Ramakrishna, of course. And at that time he was in Samadhi, I am sure of it. Because only in Samadhi one can have the vision of divine incarnations. So Samadhi is the most mature form of mental concentration when the mind is concentrated on divinity. So in order to experience divinity, if a person can only concentrate his mind on God for 28 minutes and 48 seconds, then that person will have Samadhi. Less than half an hour. But to do that, one will have to practice for many, many years to bring the mind under control. Samadhi is the culmination of mental concentration. I think I have given you some idea about what Samadhi is. There are not many people who have had this experience. And there are some schools of thought in India where Samadhi is not considered necessary. There was one saint who used to say, Samadh Famadh kya hai? Then is what is in Hindi he said, this Samadhi etc. these are not necessary. He was most probably a follower of another path. Most probably that was Jnana Yoga or something. In any case, the subject of my talk was what is Samadhi, and I have tried to give you some idea about what Samadhi is. Samadhi is the most intense concentration of mind. When the mind, like a laser beam, it can be focused on divinity. And then the experience will come. Then the experience will come, Aham Brahmasmi, I am divinity. That experience will come. That happens only in Samadhi. Let us hope someday, by God's grace, we all will experience that. Thank you so much for your patience. Bye-bye. Good night.